Hello. I think we should get started. First of all, thank you all for coming at a very terrible hour, 4:30, just before dinner. But I hope we'll be able to keep you entertained. As we said in our little description, we really hope that you will also participate. You know, we are not experts on this. I mean, all we're doing is kind of presenting some ideas, some suggestions for things that we've come up with to deal with the problems we've run into. But also, you know, we're very interested in hearing what other people are doing, because I'm sure you've done much more interesting things than we have. So anyway, my name is June Liebert. This is Chris Niedringhaus. And why don't we introduce ourselves a little bit. I'm a former electronic resources librarian at the University of Texas. And I recently started in the law school. I shifted over to law school in January. And I'm now the director of internet initiatives. But essentially it means that I'm in charge of the web and all databases. So that means all the registration systems, everything is now under my purview, which is really great because the two areas really do mesh together very well. And what we discovered is a lot of the database information is information that should be served out on the web anyway. So that's where I'm coming from.
Right. I, until about 3 weeks ago, was Senior Electronic Services Librarian at the University of Toledo. I moved and am now the associate at Georgia State. Thank you for coming, my contingent in the back. So most of my experience that I'm talking about is actually at Toledo, because I did a lot of web work, whether I was supposed to or not. And I'm new enough that I say we for both schools, so if you're confused about which one I'm talking about, just remind me to clarify that. But that's where I'm coming from. Okay?
And I thought we should also tell you a little bit of the history of the websites at both UTs.
At both UTs. Yeah.
At the University of Texas, we had a secretary who apparently was promoted to webmaster, and she had no computer background, had no computer training, and was just told to create the website. And that's what she did. And she did a very admirable job, considering that she had no background in it whatsoever. But it was just her, and she was the only person in the entire law school. The library had its own website, and that's what we did our own thing, because we were unhappy with what they did. And so we just kind of did our own thing. But we got a new dean, and things changed, which is what you're going to hear about throughout our presentation.
Right. At the University of Toledo, when I started there, the way they were doing their website was that we had a part-time reference librarian who worked 20 hours a week for the library and was granted 5 hours a week by the law school to do the entire law school website. So when I was hired, she desired to give part of that away, understandably, and I was given the library's part of the site. Things changed at Toledo for a number of reasons. We acquired, actually 3 days before I started at Toledo, they acquired a new president who, the nice way of saying it is, made a lot of changes. Staffing was greatly diminished because either positions were eliminated or people quit. And then a hiring freeze was instituted at the same time. So staffing plummeted, and something had to be done to maintain the law school's website. We also got a new law school dean who had much greater interest in promoting the law school through the website. So that's sort of where I'm coming from with all of those things. So let's get started. We're talking about staffing. As much fun, our big fight when we put this presentation together was we kept wanting to talk about all the cool tools and techniques you can use to actually create the website, but we're talking about the people. And the first thing that you need to ask yourself is, who should be involved in this process of doing a website, of redoing a website, of maintaining a website. And so our first audience participation is that you're going to tell us who should be involved. And I will call on people if you don't volunteer.
Don't volunteer. We'll start going around the room.
Whose website is it?
Oh, any law school.
Any law school.
But it's the
The
site.
whole law school.
The whole law school. So think in terms of law school and library. So Ken, yes ma'am.
Are you talking about development of content, or are you talking about
Everything.
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 Everything. Right now we're covering everything.
Who should be involved
So who
in the
should
whole
be-
website process?
Yes ma'am, in the back row.
Yes. The people who create the content have to be involved in some way, and because they're closest to updating. So,
Okay.
creators of content.
Content creators.
Right? Yes?
I know at our school we have a public relations or director of communications, public relations person who wants to have a say.
Okay. Yes.
departments and students? Some students.
So students. The individual departments, I assume you mean admissions, career services, that kind of thing.
Oh, let's throw in someone from IT to make sure the whole thing will work.
IT? Oh, yeah. There's IT.
The library?
Library? Anyone in particular, or? Okay. And as far as content or design, you think they should do their own separate part?
It depends on if it's going to be one or separate.
Okay.
They should be the information architecture.
You can just shout them out. It's easier. Anyone else?
Yes, ma'am.
The faculty member who knows about the curriculum.
Anybody else? Any other thoughts on who should be involved?
Sure, somebody from every department in the school.
Okay, department, cover that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, get that down.
What about anybody from administration? Do you think we should involve
Well, I
them?
think of the dean's office as sort of one of the departments.
Okay, that's fair. Anybody else you can think of? That covers just about everybody in the law school? Okay, so we're going to involve everybody in the law school, which is not necessarily a bad idea. We're going to talk about how to do that, though. Okay.
So Chris and I just kind of threw in some ideas. You know, you could do this ad hoc coalitions. You could have, you know, little groups of people who just get together and talk about things. You could have an internet department, which is kind of what we went to. So these are just some ideas that we had, and you certainly came up with some good ones.
You know, everybody's seen this, the lone web guru. Somebody gets picked out and is told, you're going to do a website. Whether you know how to do a website or not, you're going to do it. We even added information technology group just for you, Ken. We were thinking about you. There's always the infamous law school computer committee. Yeah. Sometimes the computer committee gets put in charge of putting together the website. And anyone with the authority to overrule decisions that have already been made. So you have to think about, you know, who's got that political power. Obviously the dean. You want to
We
share?
have a marketing director, just as you do.
Yeah.
And she, we started going through a process, and she came on board, and we redesigned. 3 months into the process.
Right. So the idea is there's a whole bunch of different formats that you can do this in, and we realized that probably everybody in here comes from a different setting in some way or another. People have different levels of staffing, they have different levels of money, they have different levels of interest in the technology. So it's a very overview of what you can think about.
All right, so another way to look at this is kind of, instead of looking at the people, to identify the skills that you need first. So these are some of the skills that came out of this wonderful book called...
Which we didn't bring.
No, I have it. It's called Collaborating.
There's a book called Collaborative Web Development.
I did not bring
and
it.
the last slide, we have a list of resources, and these slides will be up on the CALI website.
But it's a wonderful book, and she really, although she takes it from a consultant's point of view, what if you were a web consultant? But what's nice is she breaks it down into all of these different areas that you should be thinking about. And one of them was the skills needed. And I think what happens a lot of times is, just as it happened in Texas, yes, we need a website, and here, you go do it. And no one ever thinks about, well, does this person have these particular skills? And what happens if the person you picked has a really terrible design sense? Or that's happened. We know. Or has no understanding of the information and how it should be organized, which is unfortunately what happened in our case. So these are some of the things that we thought would be important for that.
So you've got to think about who you want to involve in a general sense, because you'll have to get more specific later, and then you have to think about what skills you need, and then what roles those people will fill, or what roles you need filled.
And one person could fill multiple roles, or all of them, as it may be in some cases. But there are different roles involved. So one is a project manager, and we thought really the most important thing a project manager does is communicate with everyone involved, so that everyone's on the same page, so everyone gets the work done. Someone who will hassle you if you start falling behind. This kind of work. It's really, this is really what I do, and it takes a tremendous amount of my time. I spend a lot of time in meetings just running around, getting after people. When are you going to give us this? When are you going to do this? This is new. Why didn't you tell us? So it takes up a tremendous amount of time. A design team, it could be, once again, just one person, or it could be a consulting team. The information technology team, the people who actually make it run. In my case, we actually use the university server. We use the university's web servers. We don't run our own web server. So that's one less headache for us. And it works really well because, they have like 10 computers that are actually the web. And so it rarely, I think the downtime for us is something like 99%. It's always up.
Right.
So
Toledo did not have its own server because of staffing issues, and it worked just great. But you have to have, in that situation, then you have to have somebody, probably your project manager, who has a relationship with your main campus IT staff, because you can't just put it on their servers and then have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, and
So-
one big drawback that I've found is, they have rules, and you can't just stick that, CGI program on there and run it. You have to run it through them, and they have to make sure it's okay and it's not going to blow up their system, and a year later, maybe they'll let you do it. So there are definite problems with using, there are definite pros and cons to doing it that way.
Right. One thing that you'll see is we've got multiple layers here. There's a project manager, and then we've got a departmental production manager. If your staff allows you to do this and you can spread the work around, it's nice to have someone in each department who works with the people in their department to organize the information that's being put out there, to make sure that things are done in a timely manner, and who understands that it is a part of their job. The worst thing that you can see is to go to a law school site, go to, I'm just picking this out of the air, to the alumni page, and all the information is 3 months old. That's bad. And so a departmental production manager can help you do that. Okay.
And then, of course, the content producers are the people who actually write and produce the content, as you pointed out. And personally, I prefer that to be the person who actually has control of that particular piece of information. For instance, I used to do the library's website, and one problem I had was updating the library hours, because I was up on the 5th floor. I don't even know when the library was really open. It was just kind of this, I was up in my own world. And the person who actually set the hours and actually created these wonderful little bookmarks that he handed out, and finally I got it to a point where I handed the hours over to him, and it made a tremendous difference in my life.
Yeah, and that's true for anything. I mean, if let's say you've got this situation where it's one person for the law school who's been handed this project, there's no way that they can possibly handle all the content. Because the other aspect of that is, and I'm this way too, my information needs to get on my web page like 5 minutes ago. And so if you've got one person who's trying to handle everybody's content, they're going to just run around like a chicken with their head cut off trying to deal with everybody's emergencies. So the more you can spread that out, the better.
And last but not least, testing the site. I think this is probably the toughest one for most people because, who has time? You're lucky you got it together. I know I'm guilty of this. You're just going to throw it up, and if somebody complains, we fix it. But it's something you should really think about, as you implement new pages, is that, the idea of having a second person or a third person, editing everything, checking everything. The biggest problem I have is with spelling errors. With the content producers, it's great that they're producing this content, and then they hand it over to my department, and somebody in my department will convert it to HTML. But it's so easy to not actually read the content that you're converting, and inevitably there are spelling errors. So it's really important that you have somebody who does nothing but check the website.
So this is great. You know that you have to think about who should be involved and the roles and what kind of positions need to be filled. But right now you've got a website. I'm kind of going on the assumption that most places already have some kind of website. But you know that it really needs to be redone. But maybe you're the only person at the law school who knows that it really needs to be redone. So now you have all this fabulous knowledge about the kind of people need to be involved with it and what they need to do. How are you going to convince the rest of the law school and get the money?
Yeah, and really it has to start at the top with the dean. I was fortunate that, we transitioned at a time, all of this happened at a time when we got a new dean, and he was very excited about the web, and so we were able to do a lot of things we weren't able to with the previous dean. But even with the previous dean, what we did was we have a wonderful associate dean of technology, and what happened was we kind of had this triumvirate of these three people who were really concerned about technology at the law school. And we started with the computer committee and realized that we were just kind of banging our heads on the wall because nobody was listening. So what we did was the three of us sat down and we kind of wrote out what we thought was wrong with the law school's IT structure and what we thought would fix it. And then when the new dean came in, she just handed him the document and said, "Here, do this." And he read it. I'd like to think he read it, but I think he realized that we had really thought a lot about the process and what was wrong, and so he trusted us to take the project on.
One of my favorite, and perhaps this is just my experience, but to me, what always gets people, or by people I mean deans, is look at the peer institutions. Make up a list of those law schools that you always hear people comparing you to, and that you're very concerned with, where you stand in the realm of things. And hopefully their websites are better than yours, because otherwise you don't have much of an argument. But look at those peer institutions, take a look at what they're doing with their websites. What are they providing their students? What are they providing prospective students, alumni, everything that they're putting out there, and then make the argument, gosh, we're competing with these people, and we can't even compete in this area, and this is how students are coming in, are going to look at us. That, to me, is a huge clincher.
Yeah, and for me, it was Duke's website. One of our associate deans just loved the Duke website, and he kept coming up to me and saying, "Why does Duke have this great website and ours is so terrible?" And I'd say, "Wow, well, it's a really terrible problem, and I can't do anything to help you because I'm just this librarian." So I think that helped tremendously. And the other thing we did was we started printing out pages. We started printing out color versions of other people's websites, and we started showing them around to important faculty members, to associate deans, and suddenly there was this kind of this groundswell of, wow, we really do have a terrible website. Maybe we should do something about it.
And that's important too, because I would say, the dean would come to me and say, why can't, because even though I was only supposed to be doing the library part, that person who was doing the whole law school part, well, she left too, and we had a hiring freeze, so, and the dean would come to me and say, oh, look at what so-and-so is doing. This is fabulous. Why can't we do this? And I'd look at him and I'd say, because I'm a full-time librarian. And that's it. But that didn't do it. That's not what got it. What got it was faculty seeing things on other people's websites and then saying to the dean, gosh, we really need to do something like that. So talking to your faculty, talking it up to them is often a good way of doing that. Okay.
And last but not least, statistics. It's something that's easily understood. I could go to my dean and say, well, we had more hits on the library's website than the law school did. Or that was always a good one. Or, at least you can show them progress. I like statistics because you can show them progress. Look, we got, so many hits then, and look, we have so many hits now. And that's what happened with the library website. When I first started, we got like maybe 6,000 hits a week. And after I redesigned it and we really souped it up a little, we went all the way up to about 10. We average about 10,000 hits a week on the front page. We all know. Yes, statistics can be kind of meaningless, but in the aggregate, I think, it's good for comparison purposes.
Okay. So you've talked everybody into it. They're on board that something needs to be done about the website. Great. Now what are you going to do about it? You have to determine your goals, because that's going to tell you, how many of these people,
How big your project's
going to be. How many people do you need to involve on a full-time, part-time basis? How many people are going to share those roles that we talked about? So you figure out what the goals of the website are. And of course, you have to balance that with how much money you have and what kind of resources you have. The one thing that I ran into that could be a difficulty when I was working on the website at Toledo was the people who doled out resources didn't have a good feel for how much time it took to do what you needed to do. And that's very important that you have to impress, and I'm sure, this is like preaching to the choir, but you have to impress upon people. This is a very time-consuming task. People didn't understand why I couldn't sit at the reference desk and work on the website. And it's one of those things that you really have to make that point. And again, one really good argument that I used was finding out what your peer institutions, what kind of staffing, how are they managing their website, and what kind of staff they're using. And again, hopefully you're behind the curve on that. So
once you have a general idea of how big your project's going to be and generally how much money you're going to have, or if you're going to have any at all. I think that's the first question. Will you have any money? Is it going to be enough money? Is it going to be a lot of money? And so one thing to do is just sit down and look at who you have already on staff and look at their skill sets. And that's sort of what happened to us. They looked at me because I was the only person, I guess, in the law school at that point who really knew a lot about the web. And it just worked out really well. The other thing that needs to be done is to look at these people's job descriptions. And if you do feel that that person is appropriate, well, then you have to redefine their job descriptions. Should you outsource? Even though we have a web team, and I actually even have someone who does some web design for me, we decided to outsource the design. In our particular case, it was because we had an alumni who was a friend of this design firm, and so we had to use them. But as it turned out, it was a really wonderful experience for us, and they came out with a really fabulous design. And in fact, I can show you our design. This is our new design. Let me go back to, let's see. This is our old design, and this is what the woman who was a secretary created. And we've since, souped it up. We had to change a lot of different things, but it's slightly better than it used to be. And then, of course, this is our new design. And so it's actually a little bit different than this. This is just for instance, they thought this was a football game, so they stuck a little football guy on there. And we have less categories now in the center. We only have 7 categories in the center now because what we did was we ran around with this design and showed it to a lot of different people, and the feedback we got was it's too busy, there's too many things on it. And the other thing we did was we put in kind of rotating pictures so that every time you come in, you'll get a new fresh thing. So this is the result of our communications director who came in. Before she came, we had gone through this whole outsourcing process, and we had this beautiful design that was blue. And she came in and said, "This is Texas. It should be orange. What about your brand? You've got to have brand." And so we sat down and we took the blue design and we kind of fiddled around with it. And it came out pretty well. I've been pretty happy with it. So,
one thing that you need to remember whenever you're talking about outsourcing, what happened at Toledo is we had no staff. The entire website needed to be redesigned. It had been put together by people who taught themselves HTML on the fly, which is what I did too. So, and the entire site just needed to be redone. And it was decided that the best way to do that was to hire a firm to do a design and then hand it back to us to renew the content. Great idea. The people who hired the firm did not know the right questions to ask. And it got really ugly. They did a pretty nice design for us. They did not meet all the things that they should have. People started getting really angry, and it got ugly pretty fast. So one thing that you need to make sure of and impress upon the people who sign the contracts between the law school and outsourcing firms are that you need to have the right people helping you select the outsourcing firm. You need to have someone from IT. One thing that they did to us was Toledo is a front page university. They originally told us that they were going to create it in front page and then handed us a site that was created in Dreamweaver. Yeah. That look says it all. It was. They had renamed all the library site information. So just that's kind of one of those things you need to pay very close attention to, and you need to make sure that the people who are signing the contracts are aware that there's questions that need to be asked. Okay.
I forgot to mention the other thing we used the design firm for was we had no map of the law school. Just none existed, and all I got were some blueprints that were not correct anymore because they were like 10 years old and they'd added walls and a whole new building, by the way. So that was one of the things we decided to outsource because what they did, I think it's working, they created this fabulous
It was great, too. I got this phone call from June about how she'd been wandering around the law school all day with these blueprints, and did you know there was a bathroom that wasn't even on the,
I had to redesign it. Oh, here. So we came up with this great map, and what we did was we made it into a tour. This is all flash-based, and you can click on different floors. Ooh, that one didn't work too well. They're still working on it, clearly. Let me see if I can start over. But what we did was we added photos. So you can go into a certain area, let's say here, and you can get little photos that are going to pop up of the law school. And eventually you'll be able to print the maps also. So this is one of the things we decided to hand off. And it's partially because, we didn't have the in-house staff. I didn't want to spend weeks and weeks learning Flash. And we figured they would do a much better job anyway, which they did. So there are some things that, you're just going to have to identify what your limitations are and see what the alternatives are. And we could have also reached out. Maybe we could have found a computer science student or something, somebody in graphics design who could have done it for us for probably a lot less.
which is a nice segue into hire new personnel. That's an option that, well, you all hired new personnel.
Yeah, we did.
They created a department and hired a staff.
Yeah, we completely reorganized our IT department. We actually outsource our IT to the university. It's a contract, and if you want to hear about it, Brian Quigley is going to be talking about it, I think, tomorrow sometime. But we outsource our IT, and the person who was in charge of them was, and the person in charge of the webmaster at the time was basically our CFO. That's not exactly his title, but that's what he functions as. And so the money guy. And he not only does he do that, but he runs the foundation. He does all the books for the law school. Needless to say, he was a little busy. And really, it was just a complete mess. And we had IT people doing things like driving out to the lake, which is like an hour away, to fix some professor's computer. So we had that kind of stuff going on. So what we did was the dean came in and he put one of the associate dean of technology is now in place. She's a faculty member. And then we set up Brian Quigley, he's actually our head of tech services, but he also runs the computer lab. He's now the new director of IT. And then they put me in place overseeing the web and the database, as well as actually I'll also support the faculty use of technology. So, and we hired a lot of new people. We now have 2 new staff. We have 2 staff people who do the database. We're hiring a 3rd in September. I have 1 person who does nothing but design, and we're hiring another person to kind of help support the faculty use of technology end of it.
Isn't that wonderful?
Oh, and we also have 3 media services
things, and I would be like, you have what? You have how many people? So you can go the Texas route and hire everybody. Obviously, not everyone's going to be able to do that. And you can use any combination of these, but another thing to think about along with that combination is using the content management systems, building a database-driven site so that the content producers can just go in, update their content, not have to know coding, not mess up your beautifully designed site that you've done, and use that as a staffing option.
Now, clearly the most expensive option here is going to be the dedicated content management server, something like Vignette, which is tens of thousands of dollars. I don't know if anybody knows exactly how much it is. But yeah, it's a great system, but it's incredibly expensive, and I've heard varying stories about how well it actually works in real life. I would say most schools are probably not going down this road because it's so expensive. Another thing you could do is build a database-driven system, and I know several of you have done that. That's what we're doing, is we're starting to build databases to handle a lot of the content. For example, we had a list of student organizations. It existed in 4 places. We had it on the mainframe, we had it on the web, we had it in a Word document because that's all this person knew how to do, and then we had it on, I think, the library server as a separate page. So we had it in several different places. What we did was we centralized everything. It's now all in the mainframe system, and the student affairs person just goes to web form, she fills out the information, and it just appears on the web for every use. So we can print it out, we can point to it, we can do whatever we want with it. And not only that, but we can allow, because it's all controlled by a central authentication system, we have 2 people identified as contacts for every organization, and we allow those 2 people, we know who they are, we can allow them to change the content also. So it's working out pretty well, but it's taking a long time to do.
One thing that, after our issue at Toledo about Front Page versus Dreamweaver, I went in and downloaded a freebie version of Dreamweaver and decided it was a heck of a lot better than Front Page. And they had built the libraries for us, which of course are useless if all you're using is Front Page, because I never did find a way to convert them. But the library files in Dreamweaver are great to do this kind of template-driven system. And I whined and complained, you got to buy Dreamweaver, we got to do it, wah, wah, wah. I finally caught the dean at the Christmas party, and he gave it to me as a Christmas present. And it's, that kind of system really does help. We had faculty members who, for their class, some class I'm totally guessing this, so anybody from Toledo who listens to this later, on federal jurisdiction would put up a background of golf balls. Not exactly what we were going for in the look and feel of the website. So it can be as simple. I'm going to let Terrence, if he wants to, tell you this. I did just only weeks ago start at Georgia State, but my impression is that we're doing a combination of the database and the template system. So
We're at the early stages for members development.
Yeah.
Databases.
But it's an easy way to, you can do that with just the software. So.
And if you don't want to buy Dreamweaver, it's actually possible to take an even more inexpensive route, and that is to implement templates. And with just any old software. So one thing we did was we started using server-side includes. And if you don't know what that is, it basically it allows you to sort of create web pages on the fly from different parts. So what we have is we have an HTML chunk of code that sits here with the banner on it, and then we have people creating web pages, and we give them the line to include. That's basically just says include this, include the banner. And then when you view the page, it goes to this page, pulls this page over, and you as the viewer, you don't even know that it's going on because all you see is the complete HTML. And it's a wonderful, wonderful system because what's happened is, we've been redesigning, and it's great because we can change this one little thing and it'll change everything over here. Same with cascading style sheets. We had to implement those because every time you make a change, we'd have to go in and change it here, 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 and now we just have to change it in one place.
And this is important because if you're talking about staffing, most people are always going to be short-staffed. So how are you going to most efficiently use your time and resources and staff and make their life easier? When I started on the library's webpage, if I wanted to change something in the side banner, I had to go to all 14 pages and change it. And that takes a lot of time, and you forget where you've changed it, and and then you get asked a reference question, and it all goes downhill. So you want to think about these really as part of your staffing option.
And of course, the easiest thing to do is just give people a pre-formatted web page. So what we also did was we created templates essentially that, we had stuff on the top and stuff on the bottom, and then we had big comment lines. Your stuff goes down here. Don't put anything after this. And that worked pretty well. And so what we did was we had people, create things in Word, save as HTML, copy, and then slap it right into that center section. And it made life for us so much easier. Now, we don't actually allow people to FTP things up. And the reason is because we really want that second pair of eyes looking at everything before it goes up, because you never know. There are some people that we trust, and we will give them access. But for the most part, people just create the pages and they just email them to us, and then we stick them up somewhere. Does anybody? I'm sure.
Anybody have
you probably
suggestions for other?
suggestions.
Okay.
So the databases, there are like a million ways you can do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just a question, when you have them cut and paste from a Word document into the commented lines, what about paragraph breaks and things like that? For somebody who, or do you only let people do that who know code to start with?
It depends on we kind of have varying levels of trust. It depends on who you are. So if it's somebody that we know is pretty trustworthy, we'll just tell them, okay, here's the template, do save as HTML, copy, paste, send it back to us. If it's somebody that we know is really computer verse, just really does not get it, we generally just tell them, send us the Word file. So it really depends on who it is. But as I was saying about the databases, I know most of you probably use like Access, and you probably have access to Cold Fusion. And our problem was everybody in the law school uses FileMaker, and the university, in all its wisdom, has Cold Fusion, but will not support FileMaker. They only support Oracle and Access. So right now, that's my biggest difficulty, is I'm having to figure out whether we need to get a FileMaker server that does nothing but serve out web pages from our FileMaker files, or to convert everything into Access and try and work it out from there. So there are a lot of these terrible issues that come up when you use a database.
But your question actually brings up a couple of points that we're going to talk about later. One of them is training, and the other is, do you want to go on? The other is when you're dealing with your content producers, the first thing that you have to get is buy-in. They have to be willing to do it. And if they're willing to do it, they're going to be more willing to learn how to do it. Do you see what I mean? We had a situation at Toledo where the way it's set up, the faculty are set up in suites, and then each suite has a faculty secretary. And the dean decided that everybody was going on the website, and the faculty secretaries were going to take care of the pages. There's a union at Toledo, a very active union, and it caused some difficulties. But eventually, and a lot of it was just being afraid. They were like, I don't know how to do a web page. And now you're telling me this is part of my job. And we brought people into the law school. They didn't even have to leave the, I was going to say air-conditioned building, but that wasn't always true. But they didn't have to leave the building, come upstairs to the computer lab. We will walk you through how to do this. And gradually, people enjoyed it at different levels. Some people still viewed it as something that they had to do and they weren't thrilled about. Some of the people got involved and they're fabulous at it. They're really great. They have really good creative skills. And that was a result of the training and getting people to understand why it's so important.
Yeah. So, looking at buy-in, I think you get buy-in when you give people decision-making authority. And it may be really minor, but, one of the biggest problems I think most people have is, well, why should I create this if you're just going to rewrite everything, or if you're just going to ignore it, or you're not going to really use it. You have to make people feel as if what they're producing is really important and you really absolutely need it. Yeah.
Have you had a situation where If you get involved in the buyout, where people are very engaged by it, they're very dedicated to it, but the cleanup effort outweighs any benefit to the student. So you're trying to support them in professional development activity, life and job enrichment activity, but it's not to the benefit of the institution.
Yeah. Well, I think that goes back to the, finding ways that that person can participate without hindering you. Maybe that particular person would be, I don't know, did you implement templates? And I mean, it kind of, there are things you can do to make it easier.
We asked for volunteers and participation, and a number of people have gone through, the certificate, webmaster certificate, certificates in Photoshop, in Front Page, in Dreamweaver, but they're really just not good at it.
Right.
And so you end up cleaning things up. And it's that fine line. I'm sure that my colleagues are more honest when they ask me that to come.
Are these are staff?
These are professional staff. So we try to redirect them towards content development.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know if there's a mechanism there. It may be the hierarchy that you have, sort of have an ultimate authority rather than a committee.
Right.
I actually ran into this with the Student Bar Association. They wanted to create, which I encouraged. I didn't understand why they didn't have a website. We had offered them for about a year. I had actively gone to them and said, put your information up here. This is great. The students need to look at it. So, they formed a committee, and they learn very well by the time they're in law school. They form a committee, and then they debate it for, months on end. And they finally got somebody to do it, and wow, it was not what... It didn't fit in with the image of the law school that we were trying to portray. And then you run into some decisions that have to be made. You've told them that this is their area. And you've got, black and purple background with flashing neon rolling things across the top. You have to decide where you're going to draw those lines. My out was, I said, I don't have the authority to put this on the website. Because technically I was only over the library. And it eventually got toned down. It can be more complicated if you've got faculty who are really gung-ho. That's why you control the FTP. I mean, I've done stupid things with FTP, so, it's hard to control that.
I think at UT, the way we solved the problem was we had the same thing. We had a lot of different departments, and every department had their own web person who would design web pages with black backgrounds, blue backgrounds, orange backgrounds. So, I think one of the things that happened when I came in was, all right, I am controlling the design. I don't care what you think, but you have to follow my design. And so what we did, though, was it was a very gradual process. I started meeting with all these people and started warning them. All right, this is a really pretty website. Let's talk about the content that's in here. And just so you know, we're redesigning it. And it was just kind of this gradual process. We've been working on this for 6 months now. And I think at this point, pretty much everyone has said, okay. And, as I've been going along, I've been showing them the new design. This is the new design. What do you think? And I've had very little resistance. So maybe I'm just really fortunate. But I think, once again, it goes in that, the decision-making. If they feel like they're part of the process, if you don't just yank the design away from them, maybe they'll feel better about it. Okay, so you can just see what some of the things. The biggest thing, I think, is a lot of people, they get the web, and it's just tacked onto their existing job descriptions. So it's hard to it's hard to make people do something else when they're already really busy. And so that's where the buy-in from the top really comes in, because if you want these people to do something else, well, something else probably needs to be taken away, or you need more help, and you need more secretaries. If you're going to make the secretaries do it, you need more secretaries. Or if you have a department and you have, that's one of the things we've been trying to deal with is identifying people in departments who can do this for us as the department contact, and so it's been
And this
struggle.
goes back to really making the sell about how much time it takes. You have to be very realistic, and it's a hard sell. But you have to make that sale about how much time it takes, and you can't just tack it on to somebody's job and expect them to be able to do that in addition to the other things they're doing that they're already overworked at.
Okay, we're running out of time. So, decisions. Who should be deciding what? I mean, this is clearly something you have to work out, and it's going to be individualized for each institution. But one thing that I think is really important is that you have one person who has enough authority who can overrule anybody else. And fortunately for me, I have an associate dean of technology, and she's wonderful. And whenever I have a problem, for example, with the admissions department, because they won't give me any content and yet complain about not having a website, she'll go and talk to the dean of admissions and say, look, this is a problem. We can't work this way. You've got to do something about it. So, or if we do have a conflict, I want to do it one way, this person wants to do another, she'll sit down and talk to us and work out something that we're happy with.
But make sure that you work out ahead of time who gets to make the decisions.
And it's got to be one person. Because when I first started, we sort of had two associate deans that were kind of doing it, and it was bad because they kept overruling each other. And I found myself going, okay, what do you think of this? Great. What do you think of this? Oh, okay, we'll do this. And so, it was much too hard. You've got to have one person in charge.
Does anybody have any comments, thoughts, suggestions? Okay.
Yeah.
I was actually going to go back to the previous topic in terms of dealing with people whose technical skills might not be as good as we would hope. We talked about separating out the content production from design or whatever, and that's well and good when the content is simple text, which a lot of it is. But on the other hand, we want them to be able to do interactive forms or anything like that. Then that's just an issue that has to be dealt with.
Why? That to me is a team. You've got somebody who says, I want this contact, because you can't expect people to just be able to sit down and create a form. But they can say, I want this on the form, and then, have the design people do it. So.
The other thing I was going to throw out in terms of buy-ins is something we've just started, so I don't know if it's going to work or not. But also in terms of buy-in and also in terms of training, we've set up a library intranet, which we're encouraging people to play with. It's not publicly visible, and we're hoping that will.
That's a great idea.
That's a good idea.
Some of the benefits of web authoring,
Right.
and at the same time, getting a chance to practice.
People don't necessarily realize how powerful it is. When I started at Toledo, people didn't log on to the network. And the only way I could get people to do it was to take away their desktop printers and install a networked laser printer. And then they started, sharing files and realizing how convenient it is. And I think it's a great idea. If you can build an intranet and let them play with it and,
It's a great idea.
see what's going to happen. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say I agree with all the stuff that you talked about because I've been through every bit of it. Where I started at Fordham was that the university decided what the web was going to look like, and it was on the university server.
I see.
And I was on the university committee, so that was the good part. But they made a design choice that I didn't like at all, but we were stuck with it, and it basically was imposed from the top, and we had to live with it. And so the entire university looked the same. And there was a lot of resistance to that whole concept in law school. And a lot of the reasons I think that a lot of people in law school didn't buy into it was because they didn't want to be told what to do by the university.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think as time has gone by, we have now our own server, we have our own webmaster. We did farm out our design and redo our design and it's separated. Now, of course, the university site looks a lot more like ours, which is very interesting. It's a nice collaboration kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it was very difficult to get the content providers to provide content. And I think it was just because of this standardization. But now everybody is seeing the need for standardization. So it does, after they work with it for a while, they see that. But the student group issue is still a big issue.
Yeah.
I don't know how you deal with that. I mean, you have to, if it's on an official site, the school, and it reflects the school,
Right.
you got to be able to say sorry.
Well, I think part of it, one thing that can be done, depending upon what the issue is just showing them sites that look better. I don't want to say anything, but look more professional. It looked like one of these sites that you happen upon that's somebody's personal site that, has all the stuff. And the whole point that we were trying to make to him was, you want it to look like your future lawyers and that this is a professional site to present yourselves to the world. And, you show them some pages from various places that they would aspire to be, and usually that helps. They understand what you're talking about. But
I actually just kind of make suggestions.
Yeah.
I'll go around our website and I'll say, well, okay, this is really great, guys, but you're using frames, and it's illegal in the state of Texas to use frames on a state website, so you got to get rid of the frames. And generally they'll listen. Yeah, Elmer.
In terms of student organizations, what I've been trying to do at Emory, with probably not too much success to date, but mostly because I haven't been able to capture the attention of student organizations. Where I have, we use Dreamweaver, and in order for them to now get access to the organization's website, they have to use my templates.
Oh.
And after all, I'm in charge, so nobody else wants to tell them what to do, but you can't run into the same error, same sort of things of like them letting them do whatever they want.
Right.
Yeah.
And for the most part, they're really only trying to get across a limited amount of information anyway.
Right.
And for the most part, some people grumbled about wanting to do this or that, but I mean, their names don't need to change colors on the screen.
Actually, yeah, some stuff you can kill by telling them it has to be ADA, it has to meet ADA requirements, and a lot of that stuff doesn't meet it. And you can kill it that way. Yes, ma'am.
Just another comment along those same lines. We had issues where about 3 years ago we had a whole group of students who were very web savvy, and they developed a lot of stuff for the website for the student groups. When they left, nobody took over for them, so we had incredibly old information and dated, the look of it was dated as well. And what we kind of decided to do, and it's not been implemented as yet, but I think it's probably a good idea, is that we're going to have a page that shows all of the student organizations with some generic kind of descriptions of what they are, and then links to whatever they might.
Right.
But we also have several rules that are imposed about dated material and how current it has to be, and there are certain guidelines for what they're going to do with it.
Right.
And let me show you what we did with ours. We did the exact same thing. So this is our list. This is all database driven, and if you just choose one of these, it gives you the description, and it also gives you the URL and the context. So this is our way of controlling it. It's like, all right, this is the university's view of it, and if you go out here, you're on your own. This is their website. We have nothing to do with it. That's the way I like to look at it anyway. And so then you go to their website, and it looks totally different. But it pops up in a new window. So,
And if you control that page, and if they don't update, you can just remove their content.
Yeah,
There's nothing
we
there.
actually have a registration system, and they are required to register every semester or every 2 semesters, and so that way we get more up-to-date contact names, and we always point out to them when they register that their URL is included. So, well, I think we're over time here. So thank you all for coming. Thank you.